This year in the Transatlantic Academy, we're looking at the state of democracy. The Middle East would seem to have offered a great deal of hope recently compared to other regions of the world. Undoubtedly, a lot of progress has been made in the last 2.5 years since the Arab Spring erupted, but many people in the region are expressing disappointment that the extent of democratic reform has not been as far-reaching as many people hoped would be the case. In fact, the story from the region is that of variation. There's a lot of variety between different states. At one end, we have Tunisia, which has made remarkably impressive progress towards consolidated democracy, even though some people fear that that progress has stagnated recently. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have many other countries that have made no real political opening at all. Other countries situated in the middle, like Morocco or Jordan, implementing some degree of reform, but not really democratization. So I think there's a mixed bag of reform there. Certainly the region is not as stagnant as it was 2 years ago, and citizens, most importantly, citizens across the region are demanding more open forms of government. The degree to which the institutions have opened up and have reformed in response to that demand is, however, very different between different countries. I think one of the fascinating debates in the Middle East at the moment is over exactly where the region is going politically. Certainly many people in the region will say that they aspire to democratic forms of governance, but perhaps not of exactly the same kind that we see in the West. However, many people doubt that there is something that approximates to a distinctive Islamist form of democracy. In fact, President Morsi in Egypt has said that he does not believe that people want a distinctive Islamist form of democracy. So I think this is one of the open questions in the region. I think people may want types of political reform that are not exactly the same to those in the West, but perhaps the nuances are not so significant that we're talking about wholesale models of Islamist democracy that are completely different from Western-style liberal democracy. I think the transatlantic community does have a role to support political reform in the region. I don't think either the US or European countries will in any way determine political outcomes in the region. People are not seeking a Western form of identity. That's not what's really behind their drive for more open democratic forms of government. But that doesn't mean people in the region don't want support from outside where it's appropriate. And I think so far the US and European governments have responded reasonably well. They've tried to strike a balance between supporting reform too much and not supporting it enough. I think on some occasions they've struck the right balance. In other parts of the region, they really have still stuck to a preference for the status quo or a very cautious approach to supporting reform that probably still lags behind a little bit the degree of demand there is in the region for democratic reform. So the US and the EU have this very difficult, fine balance to strike. I don't think they're doing a bad job. Their influence will not be primary in any way, but I think they at least need to make sure, to a greater extent than at present, that the way they act in the region doesn't make it more difficult for people on the ground to achieve democratic reform.